Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Gaffer and Gear. Today it's another gear review and this time we're having a look at the Aputure 600X Pro. So if you don't know what this is, let me very quickly catch you up. So this is a 600 watt bicolor LED light engine, color tunable from 2700 Kelvin all the way up to 6500 Kelvin with a very high color render. The unit is also dimmable in 0.1% increments. It boasts built-in lumen radio and 16-bit dimmers. It is Bowen's mount compatible, so you can use dishes, for example. You can also mount onto it soft boxes, lanterns. Aputure even have a 5-foot dome that is now available for this unit. But the one accessory I would recommend is the F10 Fresnel. Now with the F10 Fresnel on, compared to other Fresnels set to 3200 Kelvin, this thing is 47% brighter than a Studio 2K Fresnel, and set to 5600 Kelvin, this unit is 95% the brightness of a 1.2K HMI Fresnel. So in today's episode, we're going to have a look at the 600X. I'll tell you what's good about it, what's not so great. We're going to have a look at it with the F10 Fresnel, and we're also going to have a look at it with the projection mount. Alright, so before we get underway with the review, just the usual disclaimers. Aputure did send me this light and I do get to keep it for Christmas. Now the F10 and barn doors are mine. Now when it comes to talking about the negatives of this light, I don't have a lot of negatives to talk about. And that's not because Aputure have greased me up with a lot of money, it's because I do beta testing for them. So a lot of things that would have been negatives in this review, they've addressed before the light got released. Now I'd like to start off the review by pointing out that the 600X here is not a bigger version of the 300X. In comparison to the 600X, the 300X is a very prosumer unit. So let's go over the differences that make the 600X a very professional unit. Number one is it is weather resistant. It is designed to be used outdoors in the rain. Not just the head, but also the controller box. The next thing that's been improved is the controller box has built-in lumen radio. Now it's not just a receiver module, it's a TMO2 transmitter receiver module, which makes this unit future compatible with wireless DMX mesh networking. The next thing that's been improved is the internal dimmers. The internal dimmers have been upgraded from 8-bit to 16-bit. Now that enables you smooth DMX dimming without any flickering or shimmering. Now the next thing that's been improved is the processing. By reading the signals coming in, this can interpret that I'm doing hand operation because the signals are not consistent, and it will smooth it out and give you nice, beautiful dims. So overall, it's a massive improvement over the previous generation of X product. All right, so let's go over how much it costs and what you get for your money. So this kit here sells for about $2,000 US, which is about 3,050 Australian dollars. All right, so you get this very well built bag, which has carry handles on both sides as well as on top. It has wheels at the one end and also an extendable handle at the top, so you can wheel it around quite easily around your location. Now, everything inside is very neatly packed, so the space is used very, very well. Now, what is the one thing I have always complained about with their previous products? Short head leads. But not this time. 7.5 meter head lead supplied as standard. So now you can get this on a menace arm or a boom without having to wonder about how you're going to mount the controller. The next little thing is a small detail, but I think it's very clever. The protective cap is bright red. So if you turn the light on and the room goes bright red, you know you've left the cap on. The mount is a combination junior and baby pin mount. So it doesn't matter what stand you've got, you're going to be able to mount to them. But make sure you get a nice heavy duty stand for this light. Next is the locking system. It's a disc locking system, so it locks really tight. Now, something I want to point out here, it's going to make Aputure cringe. On a few gaffers forums, I've seen posts where people have had the stirrups here break on the 600Ds. Now, looking at the photos, I can tell you what the problem is. it was a bad batch of product. They actually didn't have the metal inside here, and the light the stirrup was screwed directly into the decorative plastic. So if you've seen those posts and you're concerned about the lock-offs on these and the stirrups not being able to take the weight, particularly of the F10 Fresnel, I've been using the 600Ds now for about 9 months with the F10s and I haven't had a problem. Next you get the controller box. Okay, so in the bottom here you've got your DMX in and out, you've got your power in, and what else is here? You've also got a 48 volt DC in, so you can run this thing at full power off batteries in the future. Now you have 2 V mounts on the side, or gold mounts. Now you can currently run at half brightness off those V mounts. Now you do have an option in the menu system to override and run at full power off your batteries. Now with the current battery technology, that won't get very far. You'll trip your batteries out very quick. Next you get a nice long power lead. I think that's 7.5 meters by memory. You get the lightning clamp, which connects the controller to your light stand. Now the jaws on this spread wide enough that it will fit a wind-up stand. And you get a hyper reflector. Okay, let's go through the pros and cons, starting with the cons or the negatives first. And I've only really got the one con, and it's not even to do with the light. It's the hyper reflector. I hate this thing. All right, so what's wrong with the hyper reflector? Well, the first thing is it has a very obvious hotspot. So if you have a look at the whole diameter of the beam, the inner third is hotter than the outer 2/3. Now set to daylight at a distance of 3 meters, the outer 2/3 average 3,298 lux, whereas the center third averages 6,227 lux. Now if you're using this light bounced off a ceiling or maybe going through a diffusion frame, you're probably not going to notice. But if you're using it to directly light a scene with the hyper reflector, you might have a very noticeable hotspot in the center of your frame. Now the next negative for me with the hyper reflector is to do with how it affects your kelvins. If you put the hyper reflector on the light warms up, but it doesn't warm up consistently. The reflector seems to be filtering out some daylight spectrum. So here's what I mean by that. If I have the light set to 3,200 Kelvin and I don't have a modifier on, I get 3,142 Kelvin. Now when I put the reflector on, the Kelvin drops down to 3,093 Kelvin. So there's not much difference there in terms of Kelvin when you're operating the light set to a low Kelvin. But when you operate it set to a high Kelvin, the difference becomes even more noticeable. When I set the light to 5,600 Kelvin, with no modifier, I got 5,497 Kelvin. That's only a difference of 103 Kelvin from the target value. Very acceptable. However, when I put the reflector on, it warmed up even further. With the reflector on, the Kelvin drops to 5,220 Kelvin. That's 380 Kelvin off the target value. So overall, I'm not a massive fan of the hyper reflector. Now I don't think the next thing is a negative, but I will point it out just in case for some of you. This is a bicolor light, so it has 2 light engines. There's a lot going on in here compared to the 600D, so it needs some more cooling down. So it has a cooling fan in the top, and it also has a cooling fan in the bottom. So the cooling fans do run louder than they do on the 600D. Now when you fire it up, it does crank up quite high and then it backs down to the speed that you've got it set to. Now in the filming of this video, I've got the fan set to medium speed, so you can judge for yourself if it's going to be an issue. Alright, so let's go into the positives now, and I'm going to be really brief on this because otherwise we'll be here all day. Okay, so the build quality is sensational. It's absolutely what you would expect from the Pro N range of Aputure. Built-in lumen radio, that is a must for me with how I operate my sets these days. 16-bit dimmers, so really smooth dimming, especially over DMX. Weather resistant, I don't know if I've already mentioned that, but it's weather resistant. You can have it outside in the rain. Now the next positive I haven't mentioned yet. It is super high speed flicker free. The light engine is running at 30 kilohertz. Now in addition to that, let's say you're working with somebody who's got a camera that is, let's be blunt, a heap of crap, and it has a really slow rolling shutter, and they're shooting at off speeds. Even at 30 kilohertz, you might catch a bit of a shutter issue, but not a problem with this light because you can also tune the frequency that it's running at in 100 hertz adjustments up to an additional 2 kilohertz. The next positive for me is, even though this is a bicolor chipset, the lensing system over the front of the light here still gives me a crisp singular light source with no modifier. Now, where I think this unit really heroes is when it's paired up with the gigantic F10 Fresnel. All right, so I think this Fresnel really is worth the additional $500 US or 610 Australian dollars. Now, that price includes the barn doors, which are sold separately. Now, I don't use the hyper reflector much with my 600Ds. I own two 600Ds. I use the F10 all the time. All right, so the F10 gives me the barn door control that I'm used to from a traditional Fresnel, and it gives me a nice even spread. Now, here's the thing. If you've been looking for a bicolor Fresnel, something say 10 inches, and something that has DMX control, you probably know that there are a lot of lights around this price point. However, here's the big point of difference. This light is 2 to 4 times brighter than anything I've come across at this price point. So what I mean by that is the 600X with the F10 Fresnel plus the barn doors. All right, when set to tungsten, this light comes in at 47% brighter than a 10-inch Studio 2K. When set to daylight, it comes in at 95% the brightness of a 1.2K HMI Fresnel. However, there is a bit of a catch. Being bicolor and not monocolor, the F10 Fresnel isn't as sharp on this light as it is on the 600D. Now, on this setup here, I'm pumping the light through a window. And as you can see, we've still got a lot of shape and some good shadows. But I don't have the texture from the curtains like I would get from a monocolor Fresnel. The detail is still pretty good, but it's not quite there. Okay, so let's see how this light goes with the spotlight mount. So just a few disclaimers. I only have the 36-degree barrel for testing, and Aputure never made this attachment to optically line up with this light. But I've got a lot of people already asking me about this combination, so let's take a look. So if you're doing a circle or a basic square, like you're bouncing it off a reflector system, no problem at all. If you're going to try and do something like a very fine slash, then you're going to get optical problems. And in terms of projecting a gobo, forget about it. As you can see from this square window, it's miles out of shape. Now, here are the brightness specs, but to give you some idea, it comes in at about 2.4 times brighter than having the light with no modifier. Now, in terms of other modifiers, such as softboxes or lanterns, this light definitely has enough spread to fill them out properly. The light here is 1 meter away from the wall, and as you can see, it's got plenty of even spread. All right, let's start having a look at the user interface. Now, I'm in a real hurry, so I might skip a few things, because if I don't get this shot today, it's about 14 days until my next day off. All right, so to get into the basic lighting operating mode, if you're in any other mode, so like a menu, just press the lighting button here. All right, so it's a pretty straightforward user interface. You've got your brightness and your Kelvin displayed. It also displays what your dimmer curve is. In this case, it's linear. We can see that it's running off AC power, and this information is to do with your remote controlling, which I don't ever play with. So to adjust the brightness, that's the top knob, and it adjusts in 0.1% increments. Now, if you press the knob, it jumps in 20% increments. Now, the other knob is your Kelvin. So as you twist it, it adjusts in 50 Kelvin increments. If you press the button, it'll jump to presets. Now let's have a look through the menu system. To select the menu system, just press the menu button, and it's icon driven. So just twist the top knob to find the icon that you want. Let's have a look through some of our options. We've got dimmer curve, so press that, and we can select what type of dimmer curve the unit is running. To get out of a menu without making a change, press the back button. Okay, we've got our fan modes here. So we can select high speed, which sounds like a jumbo jet's taking off. We can select medium, which is what I've been running on all day. And we can select silent. Now, if we select silent, none of the fans run, but the light is reduced to 60 watts output. Okay, so let's go back to full power. Next thing is your studio mode. So studio mode, when you've got that selected, the light will turn on as soon as it gets AC power. So you've got a simple case there of on or off as your toggle. Next is your frequency adjustment. So this adjusts the frequency in 100 plus increments and gives you a total of 2 kilohertz additional frequency if you need it. This is for timing the light into rolling shutters when you're shooting high speed. The next thing on the menu is control system. So let's have a look in there. And we've got a choice of Bluetooth, 2.4 gigahertz, Lumen radio or Ethernet. All right, so if you're trying to run the unit off Lumen radio and you just can't get a DMX signal through, this is the menu you need to go to and just check that your Lumen radio is turned on, because the previous person might have used the phone app. The next thing in the menu system is language, so we stay clear of that. And then we've got factory reset. So factory reset is a must for a rentals company. Now the next thing is a new feature, battery power options. So let's click on that and we'll have a look at full battery power first. So this enables you to run the light off the V-mount batteries at full power. Now when you flick on that, there is a huge disclaimer explaining to you that there's a good chance your batteries aren't going to cope with it. You need batteries that are capable of producing 360 watts continuously. Currently, that's no battery I've heard of, so we'll go to cancel. Now, if you do go into this mode and you trip your batteries out, which you will, the next option is wake up batteries. So if you click on that, it'll reset the batteries and get them started again. Now, I'm in two minds about this feature. I understand that it's in here to future-proof the light. Somewhere down the track, maybe someone will make V-mount batteries that are capable of doing this. But in the meantime, from a rentals perspective, I can just see people tripping out batteries. The next thing on the light is output mode. So you can select whether it's running at a constant output mode. So that means if you change Kelvin, the light level stays the same, or you can set it to maximum output. So if it's brighter in daylight, for example, it'll be brighter than in tungsten. And the last thing we'll cover is the DMX menu. So let's go into there. Now, as you can see, everything suddenly got brighter because I have my Lumen radio transmitter running close by, and this is already set up to receive signals from it. So our first option is DMX address. That's pretty straightforward. Next one down is DMX loss of behavior. So we've got a few options there if you lose the DMX signal. And last down is DMX profiles. So you've got a basic 2-channel mode. So if you're not running special effects, you're not wasting DMX channels. You've also got 5-channel effects and lighting, which is your constant light, plus your special effects, which takes up 6 channels. That's the operating system. Okay, so let's test the DMX now. So this is running off an 8-bit profile over Lumen radio. So first we're going to test instant on-off commands. So the light turns instantly off, but it has a very fast fade up. Now let's have a look at a 5-second fade to black. And a 5-second fade up. Okay, 2.5-second fade to black starting now. 2.5-second fade up. 1-second fade to black starting now. 1-second fade up starting now. And now for some half-second fades. So the fade ups are quite good. The fade downs do have a clunk right at the end. Now let's have a look at how the light instantly changes from 3200 to 5600 Kelvin. So as you can see, it doesn't do an instant change. There's about a half-second switchover. Now let's do a 5-second changeover of CCT, going from 3200 Kelvin to 5600 Kelvin. Now back the other way in 2.5 seconds. Going back the other way in 1 second. Going back the other way in half a second. And back to daylight in half a second. Now let's do a 5-second fade to black and a CCT switchover. Now we'll do a 5-second fade up with a CCT switch over. Now this time I'm going to do a fade up from 1% brightness to 100% brightness over 5 seconds starting now. Now a fade down to 1% over 2.5 seconds starting now. Now let's really test the 16-bit dimmers by doing a fade up from 1% to 100% over 1/4 second starting now. Okay, let's start going through all of the stats that I've collected. Let's start off with brightness first, and we're going to have a look at the brightness of the unit at 1 meter with no modifier on the front. So this is for all you people that want to put a softbox on. Okay, at 3200 Kelvin, I got 11,070 lux. At 5600 Kelvin, I got 15,155 lux. Now let's have a look at the brightness at 3 meters with no modifier on. At 3200 Kelvin, I got 1513 lux. At 5600 Kelvin, I got 2087 lux. Now let's have a look at the brightness values with the hyper reflector on. And I've taken readings for the center value and outside of the hotspot. Set to 3200 Kelvin in the center of the beam, I got 4464 lux. At 1/3 of the way into the beam, outside of the hotspot, I got 2388 lux. Set to 5600 Kelvin in the center of the beam, I got 6227 lux. 1/3 of the way into the beam, outside of the hotspot, I got 3298 lux. Now let's take a look at the brightness values with the mighty F10. Set to 3200 Kelvin in flood, I got 5329 lux. Set to full spot, I got 15,470 lux. Set to 5600 Kelvin in full flood, I got 7,400 lux. When set to full spot, I got 21,412 lux. Now let's take a look at how much power this light draws in its AC mode, and all of these readings are taken with the fans running at full speed. At 5600 Kelvin, I got 623 watt. Running at 3200 Kelvin, I got 518 watt. And the maximum wattage that I recorded on my meters over 3 days of running the light was 669.1 watt. Now that maximum recording there is an automated recording by my tester. So I have no idea exactly when that happened. So it is most likely an inrush current when the light is fired up. Now let's take a look at the light's average CCT accuracies, and these readings are taken with no modifier. Between 2700 to 3000 Kelvin, it was out by plus or minus 29 Kelvin. Between 3000 and 4000 Kelvin, it was out on average by minus 91 Kelvin. Between 4000 and 5000 Kelvin, it was out on average by minus 105 Kelvin. Between 5000 and 6000 Kelvin, it was out on average by minus 93 Kelvin. And between 6000 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin, it was out by on average minus 138 Kelvin. Let's take a look at our average TN30 color vector scores. Between 2700 Kelvin and 3000 Kelvin, the light scored an average 95.9. Between 3000 to 4000 Kelvin, it scored a 95.6. Between 4000 to 5000 Kelvin, it scored 94.1. Between 5000 and 6000 Kelvin, it scores an average 93.4. And between 6 to 6500 Kelvin, it scores 92.9. Now let's take a closer look at some of the kelvins, starting off with the lowest kelvin we can dial in. When I dialed in 2700 Kelvin, I got 2701. The TN30 color vector score was 95% color accuracy with an average 97% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, only R9 and R12 were below 90. And this is the spectral distribution. When I dialed in 3200 Kelvin, I got 3142 with an SSI score of 87. The TN30 color vector score was 96% color accuracy with an average 102% saturation. With the CRI scores, R9 and R12 are below 90. This is the spectral distribution, and the Y point is spot on with 0 delta UV. When I dialed in 4400 Kelvin, I got 4291. The TN30 color vector test indicates an average color accuracy of 94% with an average 102% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution. And as you'd expect from a bicolor light, which doesn't have RGB emitters to track the Planckian curve, the light is slightly pink at this midpoint with a delta UV score of minus 0.0036, which makes it pink to the equivalent of somewhere between a 1/8 and a 1/4 correction gel. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5497 with an SSI score of 75. TM30 color vector testing reveals a more accurate score would be 93% color accuracy with an average 101% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the delta UV comes in at minus 0.0012, which makes it only marginally under the Planckian curve, but puts it at about a 1/8 gel equivalent under the daylight curve. When I dialed in the top Kelvin of 6500, I got 6367 with a TM30 color vector score of 92% color accuracy with an average 100% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and R12 is below 90. And this is the spectrum distribution. Thank you for watching Gaffer in Gear. Hopefully I'll get another episode out before Christmas, but I highly doubt it because I'm getting slammed with work. Melbourne's come out of the longest lockdown in world history, and all of the work is backed up. Plus we have our usual Christmas rush. If I don't get to see you beforehand, I hope you have a great Christmas. The next episode is going to be on the 5-foot dome that is available for this unit, and also I'll catch up on any questions you have for things that I forgot to mention in this episode about the 600X. Best wishes to you all. Please take care on set. See you next time.